This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Hello there, welcome to this edition of Global Business Africa. In the course of the hour, we'll run through the business news stories you need to know about from the continent and beyond. But first, a quick run through the market. So Kenya's NSE 20 rising over the 1900 point mark for the first time since the middle of November. Nonetheless, the index has actually fallen by nearly 7% so far in Q4. It's setting it on course to close 2021 with a very marginal rise, around 2%. Index heavyweight Safaricom is on course to close a year in which it acquired an operating license in Ethiopia, some 17% higher. The region's two largest banks, however, Equity and KCB, they are ending the year 32% and 19% higher. In South Africa, JSE data points to foreign investors being net sellers of stocks in the South African bourse to the tune of around $9 billion. The JSE had a standout year for some counters. MTN shares up 180% and the synthetic fuels firm Sasol nearly 90% higher over the period. In contrast, the index heavyweight Naspers is on course to end 2021 20% in the red. Here's what's coming up tonight. Tunisia plans to fight tax evasion, raise taxes and social allowances. We'll look at the numbers. Higher oil prices may hinder Japan's economic recovery from the damage inflicted by the pandemic. And we'll introduce you to a Zimbabwean scientist who will tickle your taste buds with hundreds of ice cream flavors. Some culinary delights to come at the end of the hour. But our starting point of this hour is Tunisia. Authorities over there have rolled out the draft budget for 2022. It includes measures to combat tax evasion and smuggling. The government over there aims to raise fuel and power prices while freezing public pay in order to keep the fiscal deficit down to 7.7%, some 60 basis points lower than the 2021 figure. GDP growth in 2022 is forecast to slow down to just 2.6%, even as inflation soars to an average of 7%. Some economists, however, are critical of this spending plan. They argue that the state has opted to raise taxes instead of boosting private investment.
President Kais Saied said that by adopting this bill, the state sends a positive message to the country's economic actors, as well as its international partners and foreign donors. Saied added that the government aims to guarantee the balance of public finances in 2022 and to promote a medium-term economic recovery.
The Draft Finance Law 2022 will ensure the equitable distribution of wealth and combating corruption that undermines public finances and hinders economic growth. The reforms must be carried out according to the will of the people. The decisions relating to public finances must promote the achievement of justice and equity to avoid the negative impact they could have on the poor categories.
The finance minister noted that Tunisia loses 1% equivalent of GDP in tax revenues annually. The country's total annual tax revenue losses amount to $413 million.
Fighting tax evasion as well as smuggling and parallel economy are among the pillars of the new state budget for 2022. This is at the heart of the strategy of the government and the finance ministry for the new year. We have approved many measures to limit tax evasion in Tunisia.
Analysts explain that economic growth is expected to slow down in Tunisia due to the government's decision to raise taxes in 2022, as well as to a resurgence of the COVID-19 pandemic.
The government should not raise taxes to meet expenses. It should rather encourage investment with incentives. Tunisian companies and households have not recovered yet from the repercussions of the health crisis. Raising taxes will deepen the economic and financial crisis and spread social unrest in Tunisia.
Prime Minister Najla Bouden announced that the draft finance law of 2022 provides for an increase in the allowance for poor families. The state will also help SMEs affected by the coronavirus pandemic.
President Saied declared that the reforms planned in the 2022 state budget will make it possible to achieve sustainable economic growth, improve the business climate, while preserving the social role of the state. Adnan Shawishi, CGTN, Tunis.
Onto the opposite end of the continent, Africa's most industrialized economy risks having its recovery stall partly due to the most recent wave of COVID infections. Economists surveyed by Bloomberg expect GDP growth of 4.9% this year. That's 20 basis points lower than earlier estimates of 5.1%. Annual GDP growth is expected to fall to 2% in 2022 and 2.1% the year after. Now, how the pandemic evolves and domestic power constraints are key downside risks as well for future growth. Following the discovery and sequencing of the Omicron variant of COVID by South African scientists, over 90 countries around the world imposed travel bans, affecting the already battered tourism and travel sector. Output also contracted by 1.5% in the third quarter in the wake of deadly riots. Still in South Africa, the country will stop contact tracing and it will not be putting people into quarantine since an estimated 80% of the country's population has already had a COVID infection, at least according to serological surveys. Health authorities have also approved both the use of the J&J and the Pfizer vaccines for booster shots. This comes as the country deals with the fourth wave of COVID infections driven by the Omicron variant. Angela Coppola has the details.
The role of approved COVID vaccines and boosters is simply to stimulate the human body and its immune system. It's part of a range of actions taken.
One potential strategy is to keep protection high, and that means that we need to boost the primary vaccine schedule. And effectively what that means is just topping up immunity, if you like, filling the tank, and therefore protecting once again in a stronger way against the COVID-19 infection.
So we do know that if you get the timing right, and we believe we've got the timing right, having studied this now quite extensively, you will get very good immune response generated in most people.
It's imperative that as many people as possible get vaccinated and get the booster shot, and that healthcare workers and especially hospital workers are properly protected.
More vaccination is good. And, you know, it does mean for healthcare workers that we have them on the front line doing what they need to be doing for far more days of the year.
There's no question that vaccination is definitely keeping people out of severe illness and out of hospital. And that's what we wanted to do. So even if you get exposed and you get mild illness and feel a bit lousy for a day or two, well, that's okay. It's not going to kill you. And that's what we want.
South Africa's vaccine rate is still low, at a little over 40%. Vaccine hesitancy remains an issue.
This has been well described to fall into three main categories. People feel complacent. In other words, I am not at risk for COVID-19 and therefore I don't need to do this. Or they lack confidence. I'm not sure this is for me. You know, are there side effects I'm not prepared to risk? And then thirdly, you know, I just can't be bothered. I've got life to live. I've got other things to do. I don't want to, you know, I feel too well to think about going to a vaccine center and getting myself vaccinated.
There's no question that vaccines and boosters do work. It brings down those people who are going into hospitals significantly. It's now a question of getting more people into those vaccine centers. I'm Angelo Coppola for CGTN in Johannesburg, South Africa.
Now then, the United States will lift travel restrictions on 8 Southern African countries, which it had imposed to try and blunt the spread of the COVID-19 Omicron variant. Now, that variant was first detected and sequenced by scientists in South Africa, and since then it's spread around the world. The World Health Organization and leaders in Southern Africa heavily criticized this travel ban as ineffective and unfairly damaging to local economies. Those restrictions will be lifted on New Year's Eve. All right, then a quick run through some company headlines now. Starting in Kenya, the Kenyan government has dropped plans to nationalize the national airline, Kenya Airways. Instead, the Finance Ministry plans to roll out a $1.3 billion multi-year restructuring program that includes taking over the airline's debts. Staying in African aviation, the national carrier of Tunisair, has purchased 5 new aircraft at a total cost of $260 million. It's part of plans to renew its fleet and improve its flights to Africa and Europe. We'll have a more detailed report on that a little later in the program. A court in Moscow has fined Alphabet's Google nearly $100 million for what it says are a repeated failure to delete content that Russia deems to be illegal. The ruling resulted in the first revenue-based fine of this kind in a case in Russia. Moscow's increased pressure on big tech firms this year in a campaign that critics say is seen as an attempt by Russian authorities to exert tighter control of the internet, something they say threatens to stifle individual and corporate freedom. A new kind of chip shortage is hitting Japanese supply chains. And we're not talking about semiconductors here. McDonald's have been forced to ration fries in the country as COVID-19 and floods in Canada have squeezed potato imports. McDonald's says Japan will only be selling small-sized French fries for a week from Friday in order to avoid shortages. The company has taken a measure to ensure that clients can still order fries until it weathers the storm. That's a run through your company headlines. Certainly chip shortages of a very different kind. Time for a short break. You're watching Global Business Africa. Here's what's coming up next. Tunisair is getting 5 new aircraft with a price tag of $260 million, but what's the end game there? And paddlers are helping South African communities preserve local dams. That story is coming up shortly.
The world economy as we know it is about to change. Global business reports highlight emerging markets, developing countries, and dynamic sectors worldwide. We feature top analysts and newsmakers to provide perspectives on every facet of business. From an on-the-ground perspective, we provide you with balanced and objective assessments. Fast, sharp, and insightful. Global Business, only on CGTN.
So this is it, I'm just about to be shot.
The little tents here, bottles are being thrown as they do so.
There are about 3 critical bridges here in Malawi. That's one of them, we're going to cross that bridge.
As you can see behind me, police forces
who are replying with gas. Gas just came in.
Tear gas, so it's all begun now.
Divisions leading the charge into West Mosul have brought us here.
Just got to be careful here with some gunshots.
This is where most of the fighting has been concentrated.
This is the front line now after 9 days of fighting.
We're about 2 to 3 kilometers from the front
within clear
line.
view of this front line position.
There's more to this place than just glorious landscapes. There's more to it than just, say, Table Mountain or glorious, endless salt flats. There's more to it than countries that are home to some of the deepest mines in the world. There is so much more to this place, even if it is home to some of the finest diamonds on the planet. It is the sheer diversity of the people who call Southern Africa home and the relentless drive to make it a better place that make it so special. And we know that because this too is home. No one knows Southern Africa like we do. CGTN, see the difference. Africa is the nexus of enterprise, and Global Business will tell you why it matters.
From the mega investment projects to multi-billion-dollar mergers and acquisitions.
Africa today collects, just in terms of revenues from taxes alone, $545 billion a year. If you take 10% of that and you devote it to the energy sector, problem solved.
All this on Global Business, weekdays at this time on CGTN.
Welcome back to the program. Let's head over to Tunisia. The state-owned carrier, as we mentioned a few minutes ago, has bought 5 new aircraft at a total cost of $261 million. Now, the first of those 5 aircraft was actually delivered on Thursday. 3 more, however, will come next year in April, July and September. The 5th aircraft will be delivered in April 2023.
The first aircraft was delivered on Thursday. The Minister of Transport declared that the reinforcement of Tunisair's fleet with 5 new planes will help solve the problems of delays and to respect flight schedules.
This new aircraft is the first delivered of the 5 purchased by Tunisair.
These aircrafts will guarantee comfort, safety and security. Tunisair is embarking on a process to revamp its fleet among a reform plan that includes fleet renewal. This is the first step in the restructuring plan.
The national carrier is working to optimize its network. The 5 Airbus A320neo will save Tunisair's fuel and reduce CO2 emissions.
This new aircraft will save fuel by 15 to 20%. It will allow Tunisia to go further and reach new destinations. The operation distance will reach 5,700 kilometers from Tunis Carthage Airport and open new markets for the airliner. The Airbus A320neo will also reduce CO2 emissions by 20%.
The CEO of the Tunisian airline added that the company's restructuring plan has started. In addition, the national carrier plans a capital increase. The company will also reduce expenditure and cancel unprofitable flights.
Tunisair is implementing the reform and development program by reducing the wage bill and limiting expenses. We are also negotiating early retirement plans with syndicates and social partners. The airliner needs to be competitive because we will sign the Open Skies agreement as soon as possible.
Tunisair plans to raise the load factor of its new planes by increasing to 78% the percentage of available seating capacity that will be filled with passengers by 2024.
Tunisair aims to carry 1.8 million passengers and increase its turnover to more than $280 million in 2022. The company is continuing with plans to overhaul and modernize its fleet. This program will allow Tunisair to maintain 15 to 17 aircraft in operation. Adnan Shawishi, CGTN, Tunis.
Now, Soweto's Canoe and Recreational Club has taken on the issue of water shortages in the country by ensuring that they help local communities preserve local dams. The club was formed to cultivate a lot more black paddlers, and it's produced some of the most exciting up-and-coming talent that South Africa has seen so far. CGTN's Yolisa Njamela has the details.
This is one of the dams that the Soweto Canoe and Recreational Club is helping with the cleanup, the Westdene Dam. The Westdene Dam is part of a series of connected streams flowing through Johannesburg.
Where this waterway is so critical is that it's almost the headwaters of the Braamfontein-Spruit. From Westdene Dam, it goes down through the little dam at UJ, into the botanical gardens, through that whole water system, into Emmarentia Dam, and from there it ends up in the Spruit. So if we've got a healthy Westdene Dam, it just helps clean up that entire water system.
The dam was designed to reduce the impact of flood peaks and erosion potential of nearby spruits. It's also a park and a facility that supports plants and animal life. But it's now severely damaged, and if no attention is paid, it will likely simply vanish.
And there's just a huge build-up of rubbish, weed, and everything that needs to remove. And thank goodness we've got committed local residents over here who have helped pull this together with the Soweto Canoe and Recreation Club. And the priority is just to get as much rubbish out of the dam as we possibly can, as much weed, just in order we can get some flow into the water.
With us using water most of the times, so that is a great opportunity for us to be on the other side of cleaning the river that we use, like the dam and the lakes that we use.
Locals have also joined in to assist.
As a community, we came together to do it as one. Because if we're not somebody's going to do it, we cannot set example. So we came here to set example. Some of things we can be done by talking together and working together as a community.
The organizers of this cleanup campaign say they will ensure that it continues. Yolisa Njamela for CGTN in Johannesburg, South Africa.
Cutting down trees in order to provide charcoal has risen at an accelerated pace in Somalia in recent years, and that's leading to climate change-related shocks as deforestation takes hold. There's a lot more flooding and famines a lot more frequent. But authorities say they're stepping up campaigns to try and end this charcoal trade in order to protect what declining forest cover they still have. CGTN's Mohammed Keir filed this report from Mogadishu.
Charcoal is the main energy for cooking in Somalia because it is cheap and accessible. Although the environmental impact of cutting down of trees for charcoal is visible, the business is booming.
We get the wounds and logs from faraway areas, hire people to bring it and cut it down for charcoal and firewood use. We don't have many challenges on the road.
The dealers say the market is nowadays shrinking after the armed group Al-Shabaab banned the trade in their territory.
We used to get charcoal from the remote areas before, but now it was completely banned. We instead purchase wood and burn it to make charcoal for sale.
Somali authorities say the export of charcoal trade has reduced in the past years following measures.
The cutting down of trees and charcoal export is illegal in our country, and we will take legal action against the perpetrators. The export of charcoal was very popular in the port of Kismayo, but the process has ceased during the past 2 years.
In 2012, the United Nations Security Council resolution placed an embargo on the export of charcoal from Somalia. According to a study by UN Convention to Combat Desertification, an estimated 8.2 million trees were cut down for charcoal in Somalia between 2011 to 2017, increasing land degradation and food insecurity. Mohamed Kahini, CGTN, Mogadishu, Somalia.
You're watching Global Business Africa. Time for a short break. Here's what's coming up. We'll explore how higher oil prices are hindering Japan's economic recovery from the damage inflicted by the pandemic. And Huawei is launching new products despite sanctions imposed on the firm by the United States.
Change is on the horizon. Through the shifting of time, Africa's emerging tech landscape is creating new channels.
There's a hunger for local African content globally.
Shaped by innovation, carved out by a new generation of digital entrepreneurs, sculpted by a mobile revolution, and trickling down to the most remote corners of the continent. TechSpot is seeking out the new concepts in technology, disrupting Africa's traditional sectors.
You're watching breaking news on CGTN.
Welcome to the world today on CGTN.
No war, no one again he can hold in guns.
Machine guns from police forces toward the protesters.
Were you worried about your life at that particular time? Not at all.
The activity, thank you very much for your time. What is your assessment of the state of the continent today?
Africa has the potential to power itself.
Excuse me.
Business in Africa is at a crossroads. We celebrate those who are adopting and thriving despite the challenges, from grassroots to big businesses. Global Business takes you along for the ride as we track the making of a giant. only on CGTN.
How will your world change today? What happens here? What happens there? Or what you make happen for yourself? If it matters to you, it matters to us too. Your stories are these stories that need to be told. Africa Live. Find your voice.
Accra is my kind of city. That's because when I'm here, I feel like I'm back home in Lagos or Aviation, which are two of the major cities I grew up in.
Business in Africa is high risk.
After about a decade covering business news on the continent, I've learned it's all about the high risk, but also the high returns and the high energy. You simply have to adjust in order to keep pace. When I started out as a journalist, my dream was to open people's minds to the different perspectives. From the CEO in the boardroom to the trader out in the street, we all have different stories. From Accra to Addis Ababa, from Cairo to Cape Town, and I wouldn't have it any other way. Here at CGTN, we realize that Africa is on the move, and it's moving fast, but we're moving right along with it. I'm Ucheo Koronkwo, and I'm a business anchor and reporter at CGTN.
I try to not let it affect me, but there are days when it does. I'm a human being, and to see patients in a hospital bed and their family members are not there, there's no one there to hold their hand, that human touch, you know?
I just hope everyone can remember that the situation is not permanent and that everything will get better eventually.
Welcome back to the program. Let's run through some of the stories making your headlines at this hour, starting in Libya. The country's first presidential election, which is due to take place on Friday, has been postponed. The Electoral Commission said on Wednesday that it was postponing the new date to the 24th of January after liaising with Parliament. Now, the run-up to these elections has been marred by disputes over the eligibility of candidates, but also growing security fears as well. Over in the Horn of Africa, the Ethiopian government says its troops will stay in two liberated regions and not cross over into Tigray in the northern end of the country. The federal government also says necessary measures are in place to ensure that TPLF does not present a threat. Humanitarian sources say that airstrikes did hit a key power station in Tigray's capital of Mekele on Wednesday. Power across the city has been pretty much offline since then. And at least 39 people have been killed, dozens more been injured after a massive fire engulfed an overcrowded ferry in Bangladesh. The death toll is expected to rise, with many of the injured suffering severe burns. That's a run through your headlines. Let's head east now. Japan hopes to boost its economic recovery after a prolonged state of emergency due to COVID-19. But oil prices have gone up by over 50% in 2021, and the resulting energy price inflation is just adding to the strain that households and businesses must deal with. CGTN's Terence Terashima reports from Tokyo.
In recent months, gasoline prices in Japan have soared to a 7-year high, and kerosene prices have risen to the highest level in 13 years. It's led to higher electricity and gas prices, and the increase in transportation costs and the weak yen have also bumped up the cost of flour, cooking oil, and daily necessities.
Some vegetable prices have risen by 20 to 30% recently. I can only watch how things develop.
Gasoline prices fell on speculations of surge in the newly discovered Omicron COVID variant worldwide. But price hikes are already in motion, and some experts expect oil prices to recover to $70 a barrel. Analysts in Japan say if oil prices return to that level, Japanese households will see around $250 in extra cost a year. Rising commodity prices are also hitting elderly households living on a limited pension. The older generations, especially those living alone, have to improvise.
To save household costs, I started to buy takeout lunches. If you think about buying all the groceries and seasonings, it is a waste to see some ingredients unused. I can save on costs from washing the dishes as well. I feel buying ready-made meals is more cost-effective.
Many farms producing flowers or vegetables using greenhouses like these worried that rising fuel costs could affect their production severely. The heating cost has been rising steadily, especially in the winter months. Kohei Ide owns an 8,000 square meter farm, mainly producing various kinds of tomatoes. He said rising fuel costs are not only affecting him directly, but are also driving up material costs.
It is not an exact figure, but I think the heating costs have risen by about 20%. But we are also seeing a rise in material and compost costs. Farms like us use plastic for the greenhouse, and that cost also rose considerably.
Japan has just begun easing COVID restrictions and is looking to get the economy back on track. But Ide fears another possible state of emergency and restrictions on food establishments will reduce demand for food products, further damaging businesses. Terence Teshima, CGTN, Tokyo.
On to the Philippines, where COVID cases are falling and vaccination rates are going up. As a result, the Philippines is slowly reopening, and consumption, particularly during the holiday season, has risen sharply. CGTN's Gretchen Malalat in Manila has the details.
The Philippines will be spending a merrier Christmas this year compared to last year. With a decline in COVID-19 cases and higher vaccination rate, the economy is slowly reopening, and there is a big boost in consumer and business confidence. It's very evident out in the streets and shopping malls. Groceries, supermarkets, and most shopping malls are packed with people doing their last-minute Christmas shopping. There are still many migrant workers from all over the globe who arrived the past days to spend the holidays with their families. This is despite that they need to quarantine for 7 days before they can go home. So quarantine facilities for migrant workers are free. The government pays for the hotels, but the problem now is that the facilities are getting full. When it comes to local travel, thousands are going back to different provinces to spend Christmas with their families. The easing of local travel restrictions, like there's no more need for COVID-19 tests if travelers are fully vaccinated, or the required travel passes from local government have been waived. So these have boosted a bit local travel and tourism. So COVID-19 cases have dramatically decreased in September. The country had a peak of 26,000 cases a day. But now the cases logged by the health department yesterday was only more than 200. So the decrease is because of the improved vaccine coverage and more vaccines available. Adding to that, adults are now allowed to get their booster shots 3 months after their last 2 doses of COVID-19 vaccines. So more and more Filipinos will be protected, especially with the Omicron variant. So as the health situation improves and business and consumer sentiment becomes more optimistic, the country's GDP has rebounded 7.1% in the third quarter and is expected to sustain the growth in the fourth quarter. Gretchen Malalad, CGTN, Manila.
With barely a week left to the end of 2021, this is a pretty busy shopping season in China. Experts over there are noticing several new trends in the domestic market this year.
Lights, lights, lights everywhere. There's many a dreaming scene to behold, from the lights themselves to lovely booths they decorate, all symbols of the beauty and cheer of the year-end celebrations.
I visit markets like this every winter. They have a romantic atmosphere which my friends and I enjoy very much, and the markets have become warmer and more comfortable than they used to be. The food now is more delicious and more delicate.
When I was studying abroad, I visited winter markets like this every year. And now Shanghai too has winter markets with a nice atmosphere. There are lots of Shanghai shops with Shanghai brands.
For many Chinese young people, warming themselves beside a fire while having happy snacks has become a ritual in a chilly winter season. But for many small goods sellers and restaurant owners, night markets like these are a good way for them to overcome the business winter they've been suffering from COVID-19. This scented candle brand was founded in 2019, just before the COVID-19 outbreak. Though the candles were mostly sold online, the pandemic still hurt. But now the innovative night markets have helped the candles to spread their fragrance much further than ever before.
Previously, we sold 300 to 500 candles on Taobao every month, but now we manage to sell 300 to 500 in just a single weekend. Markets like this make the shoppers more relaxed and give them a chance to get to know us directly. The rents here are lower than those for a fixed booth in a shopping mall, and there are different themes for different seasons, like the coffee festival a month ago.
Half our revenue comes from the market. At peak times, in just 2 days we can get 120,000 customers at the booth, while our downtown stores draws 10,000.
A lot of the support for the thriving night markets comes from the property giants. Jing'an Carry Center has been operating its Anyi night market since 2019, and is a big help to dozens of small and medium-sized vendors.
The pandemic has changed the way people shop, so that some vendors have had a hard time surviving. The night market lets us gather the vendors together, and it also brings in the customers they need. Some of the vendors have turned into hot brands after joining the night market. Some of them have even held pop-up stores in our shopping mall.
Official data shows that China's total retail sales of consumer goods rose almost 14% year-on-year to almost 40 trillion yuan in the first 11 months. Some estimates say the country should be the world's largest goods consumption market by the end of the 14th five-year plan in 2025.
Previously, small and medium-sized vendors were stuck in a particular area with a relatively fixed consumer group. These markets can help them jump out of their original circle and reach out to new consumers. And by going online, they can stay in touch with even more consumers and lower their rent too.
All these emerging trends are creating product upgrades, new sales channels, and a better understanding of how new consumer groups can be created and served. Li says the key to all this lies in how brands big and small can improve their image in the minds of consumers. The idea is that instead of chasing the shoppers, you encourage the shoppers to come to you. This holiday season, it certainly seems to be working. Zhang Shixuan, ICS for CGTN, Shanghai.
Now, given how reliant the planet is on China's manufacturing sector for a whole host of goods, it shouldn't come as a surprise that the world's largest single supplier of Christmas decorations is in eastern China's Zhejiang province. This year, though, the export hub of EU has been facing a supply crunch that's carried over from 2020 ever since the pandemic began. But despite material shortages and high logistics costs, some businesses say that sales have been pretty steady.
This is Yiwu, a small city in East China's Zhejiang province and the world's biggest distributor of Christmas products. It produces around 2/3 of global supplies. This year, exporters look forward to a rebound in sales after last year's fallout from the COVID-19 pandemic.
Inquiries for Christmas products have surged 60% month-on-month, starting from July, 20% more than this time last year. Most of the buyers are from the US, Brazil, Peru, and Britain. Christmas trees, decorated bouquets, lights, and candles are the most popular items.
As Christmas orders picked up, surges in global shipping costs became another challenge for suppliers in Yiwu. In fact, a large number of goods are still waiting to be sent overseas. The bottleneck is due to a lack of container ships, as some providers have already stopped services due to surging cargo rates.
It's also been very difficult to find a freight forwarder this year. I finally settled on shipping through several friends, but delivery prices are also more expensive than in previous years. Using a container costs 3,000 to 4,000 yuan more.
The pandemic has also driven up prices of raw materials.
Prices of chips and plastics have risen very quickly. The price of cartons has also risen towards the end of the year. These have had a significant impact on our production costs. Our selling prices have also increased by 10 to 20%.
This in turn has led to price hikes of festive consumer products around the world. Suppliers and buyers say they've been trying workarounds to mitigate the impact.
Our clients told us that the shipping rates have more than doubled, with containers hard to book. So they're asking us to offer the most cost-efficient ways to pack things. For example, a client that might have originally ordered 10 wreaths, but now they're asking us to reduce the number of wreaths and add more decorative strips, because the wreaths are larger and heavier and less efficient to ship.
Local suppliers say, given the pandemic's impact, they've also made their pricing strategies more flexible. City officials say Yiwu has managed to keep up with the challenges, especially during what's meant to be the most wonderful time of the year. Wang Qiwei, CGTN.
Let's jump into the world of tech. Huawei has launched a wide range of new products around its connected ecosystem built on the OS it's been developing for a while now, Harmony OS. Despite the ongoing US ban on access to some tech services like Google Play services, for example, the tech giant is still stepping up its efforts to create new products. Xu Hua reports from Shenzhen on what's hot tonight.
The foldable smartphone market has been dominated by Samsung. A recent report says Samsung occupies 93% of the foldable phone market, while Huawei has just 6%. The Chinese company faces US bans on its software and hardware, but Huawei aims to challenge that dominance. And it's just released a flip phone, the Huawei P50 Pocket, using its own Harmony OS ecosystem.
There are currently more than 220 million Huawei devices running Harmony OS, and more than 100 million new Harmony OS Connect devices were shipped in 2021.
Huawei's flip phone is part of the innovative lineup that also includes a smart car, a smart watch, a smart eyewear, and a next-generation notebook.
Huawei has not stopped innovating despite seemingly endless supply constraints. We will continue to empower the industry and accelerate the digital transformation.
Huawei is promising more innovative technologies and products of 5 major kinds: smart homes, smart office, fitness and health, travel and entertainment. Huawei is determined to prosper despite US sanctions. Xu Hua, CGTN, Shenzhen, Guangdong Province.
All right, then a quick run through commodity prices. Let's focus on oil. Baker Hughes rig data for the week is out. An extra 7 rigs in the US coming online this week. Nearly 240 more rigs coming online this year alone. That's a rise of over 80%, with a tailwind being provided, of course, by the 56% rise in oil prices in the US. The benchmark over there, WTI futures, were actually 1.4% higher on Thursday ahead of the Christmas break. 2022, though, will be interesting. It'll start with a focus on the next OPEC Plus meeting that's actually scheduled for the 4th of January, given all the uncertainty we're seeing from the most recent wave of Omicron infections, not just in the US, but in Western Europe too. The cartel has to decide whether or not to proceed with an output rise of 400,000 barrels a day of crude in January. Here's what's coming up next. I'll introduce you to a Zimbabwean scientist who will tickle your taste buds with hundreds of ice cream flavors. You'll also meet a young fashion designer empowering young people in South Africa.
Africa is a continent of diversity, with varied climates and enchanting geography, and a people so distinct, but with a shared enduring spirit. We are at the heart of the continent to bring you the untold stories.
Let's have a look.
We celebrate Africa as it shapes its own destiny.
I've been Djibouti, Tunis, Cairo,
Syria,
Juba,
Johannesburg,
Ethiopia,
Tanzania.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Images may appear to be identical, but looks can be deceiving. The difference is not always obvious. It has to be discovered. There are always different sides to a story. We put the focus on the details. To see more, to understand better. CGTN. See the difference.
The greatest journeys, the greatest sights, the greatest adventures.
Here in Panata, this weir allows the locals to walk on water.
We're far more than just TV news. We're your passport to the wonders of Africa.
To bring you stories of struggle, survival and hope.
So let's explore. CGTN. See the difference.
You don't find the stories of North Africa by sitting on the sidelines. No one else will take you where we can in North Africa. And no one else will show you what it's all about. CGTN, see the difference.
Welcome back. China is one of the world's fastest growing coffee markets, but it's also been looking at expanding its role as a bean supplier. After a deal between China and the European Union this year, the southwest province of Yunnan has been seeing a lot more opportunities for its most famous produce. Yang Jianghao reports.
Coffee growers in southwest China's Baoshan city are in harvest mode. These small fruits are expected to bring in a handsome income as a major festival approaches.
The prices vary based on the beans' quality. We first peel off the cherries, then dry the beans before they hit the market. The beans can be sold at a minimum 22 yuan per kilo.
Sitting at the foot of the massive Gaoli Gong Mountains, a large part of Baoshan boasts a special terrain and a climate similar to that of the Blue Mountains in Jamaica, home to one of the most sought-after coffee types in the world. These factors make Baoshan ideal for growing high-quality Arabica coffee. In past 2 years, local farmers cultivated some 44,000 tons of coffee beans, many of which were for export. Baoshan's coffee industry saw great promise after China and the European Union reached a deal on geographical indications in March. It's an agreement that gives protection to around 200 iconic European and Chinese products. Li Xiaobu has long been engaged in the coffee trade, with most of his beans sent to European countries like Germany. As the head of Yunnan's Coffee Association, he says the inclusion of the Baoshan Arabica coffee in the China-EU deal is a boost for the whole industry.
This means that our products are of high quality and good taste, which are widely accepted by consumers. The agreement will enhance our bargaining power in the long run, and I believe the government will introduce some new support policies.
Due to the COVID pandemic, however, exports of Baoshan coffee have significantly dropped. But officials say they remain confident and are working toward a long-term goal.
Next, we'll push for the development of the whole industry chain. For this, we'll build a centralized processing center for coffee cherries and several coffee manors. We aim to increase the proportion of specialty coffee to more than 80%.
so manufacturers are also expecting a transformation in product structure.
I believe exports will recover, and I hope what we'll provide to the global market are not just raw beans, but high value add products like cold brew and freeze-dried coffee.
Li Xiaobo also says that besides policy and financial support, talent cultivation would also be crucial to the industry's sustainable development. Yang Jinghao, CGTN, Baoshan, Yunnan Province.
A Zimbabwe-born scientist is reimagining traditional ice cream by using flavors you can only find in Southern Africa. Tapiwa Goza is a local restaurateur and has added a little twist to the frozen treat that may keep you guessing about where exactly it comes from. Each flavor tells a story of an African country. Here's that story with CGTN's Julie Shire on Crossroads.
A multitude of ice cream flavors greet you at Tapiwa Goza's ice cream shop in Cape Town. Every scoop, a burst of indigenous African tastes and aromas, including baobab, edible clay, and bitter leaf.
Food was a big part of my childhood, and consuming fruits from the garden, veg from the garden, grains from the garden was a very normal part of my life. So that's why I'm so heavily focused on African ingredients and African dishes. I happen to be using ice cream to tell these stories. That Namibian person who's never seen that flavor in that way, that's who's important. Or that Angolan, whoever, you know.
The Zimbabwean-born microbiologist has been experimenting with the frozen treats for the last 12 years. Perfecting it does, however, take time.
In the last 4 years, I've made about 650 to 700 different flavors now. It's always rising because each week I make 7 new flavors. And the reason that number is so high is not because those flavors are always available here. In fact, I don't repeat my flavors. Make a flavor once off, it sells out, we move on to the next person, to the next culture, to the next country, to the next ingredient.
Tapiwa's taste adventure has so far delighted most of his patrons.
I'm having a ginger and clay ice cream. Yeah, it's really good. It's really good. It tastes like clay, but it also tastes like ginger. I don't know. It's just like, it tastes like what it is, and it's really enjoyable. It's an interesting flavor.
It tastes really good. I've never actually had ice cream like this, and the flavors that he had were very interesting. Like, I've never ever come across flavors like that. So yeah, it's exciting to try something new.
Goza has plans to add snow cones to his menu, also made from ingredients found on the continent. So if you live in Cape Town or are popping in for a visit, one thing's for sure, these delicious treats are definitely worth a try. Julie Shara, CGTN, Cape Town, South Africa.
More stories about people from Southern Africa doing talented things. This one's about a young fashion designer who's proving to be a real inspiration for young people who are feeling a bit down, especially given all the damage that COVID-19 is inflicting worldwide. 26-year-old Ernest Motsi has already showcased his work at major fashion events, including the Paris Fashion Week. That's a pretty big deal for any designer. But Motsi only discovered his talent and his love for fashion a few years ago, after his career as a basketball player failed to materialize. In the midst of this pandemic, Motsi earned the title of head designer for Excelsior Luso.
I thought I was going to spend my whole life playing basketball. Unfortunately, that didn't work out because it's not a career in South Africa. And then I didn't know what I was going to do. One day I took my old jacket, I took my mom's fur jacket, I took the fur out and I put it in on my jacket, and the thing just turned out really nice. I came from the Free State 2017 and I was shadowing for like the year, and then the year after that I got a bursary to study at Lysol. I was really blessed. I was really fortunate to have gotten the opportunities that I got. Lysol, the fashion school, is not affordable. We couldn't afford it. And then a year after that, I got a little internship at a place called Upcycle. So basically they were using like waste material to remake clothing. And then a year after that, I was at Kateria Atelier as the junior creative director. I think fashion is my ministry. I think it's just my way of living. It's just the way I get through to people, and it's just the way I communicate better with people, you know? I have a better personality through fashion. I just feel like instead of telling someone to be confident, I can use that and they can see themselves as confident, you know?
For me, this collection represents exactly a South African woman, a glamorous woman, and now he's here doing his own thing. For me, that is like really, really incredible.
Being a young black creative in South Africa, the world is looking now, and if you are good at what you do, the world will definitely recognize that.
A lot of me is my mom. Just having picked up the energy and being around her so long and seeing her practice independence and seeing her practice strength. When I think of a woman, I think of she's the perfect example. She's the strong lady. Also going back to our storyline, Excelsior, and her being born in Excelsior. Excelsior was one of the biggest diamonds found in Africa. It was cut into 21 pieces. It was spread around the world. Hence our collection has 21 series. We were really trying to paint this strong woman, this independent woman, this reliable woman. And she's been that for me for the longest run.
All right, then, as we close out 2021, let's run through the currencies that we track on the program. The Rand weakening by about 5.6% so far in the year. The Naira in the formal market is down around 4% against the American dollar. But take that figure with a big pinch of salt, given that one, it's pegged to the dollar, but also two, there's a very active parallel market where the dollar-Naira rate has weakened as low as 570. The CBN, of course, is still very strongly resistant to the idea of floating the currency. Egypt's pound, that's still pretty much on course to end 2021 exactly where it started. The Kenyan shilling is about 3% weaker to the greenback. So then, ahead of the day when the $10 billion James Webb Telescope blasts into orbit to start its journey to Lagrange Point 2, that's it for this edition of Global Business Africa. Wherever you are, whoever you're with, happy holidays and stay safe. As always, I'd like to hear your feedback. Send it to the numbers and emails on your screen right now. Happy holidays, everyone. The World Today is up next from Washington, D.C.